Sabrina 2000s comic issue 31. The story starts out with Quigley talking on the phone, annoying us because we don't get to see the other side of the conversation for no good reason. He says you're very welcome, and fortunately Sabrina gets to use her magic, hanging up her coat. I wonder if she was only allowed to do that because nobody saw her. Hilda animates a brush telling it to get the front hall swept and clean. Then I see Zelda magically flip the TV guide while levitating it, which seems like it'd be more work than not using magic, because you'd have to take a second to imagine that happening first. And Salem uses magic to turn his milk into chocolate milk. Isn't chocolate lethal to cats? At this point I started to wonder if the plot would be about them all being pressured to not use magic. After there was a panel where they were all shown using magic so much at once that I was getting suspicious of how good the comic was being. Since when does this happen with all of them at once? I'm guessing this plot is going to be about Quigley getting his way, forcing a bunch of witches to not use magic because of a temper tantrum. He tells them that the neighbors discovered termites in Harvey's attic, and the house has to be treated immediately. So Harvey's family is going to have to move out until the place has been dusted. Okay, at least the story is going to be somewhat merciful because Harvey will be the one moving in, and not one of Quigley's relatives or friends on his dumb whim. He was the one who invited Harvey's family to live here, and probably all part of his selfish scheme to force these witches to stop using magic around him and being themselves. I mean, you'd think that him taking it upon himself to make a decision the whole family's against would cause them to kick him out for betraying their trust finally. Wouldn't they just overrule Quigley because they outnumber him? Hilda even says that it should be a family decision. I'm glad Zelda looks mad at him when she calls him out on his true motivations. Too bad that only lasts one panel before his temper tantrum immediately convinces the witches to humor him to get him to calm down. It was so charming in the 70s cartoon that Sabrina used magic so much. She even used magic to levitate the telephone to her sometimes. He says that the casual magic is out of control over here, and they're really raising Sabrina as a normal girl. Quigley, that ship sailed the minute she was born a witch. It sailed the moment she was brought into a witch's home. Obviously, if Sabrina's mother really cared about her being raised as a mortal, if she had a brain, she would have made Quigley her one and only legal guardian. Before they can even talk about Harvey staying with them, his family shows up. Why can't any of the witches just point at them to brainwash them into leaving and forget they were ever invited here? They could go live somewhere else, like a hotel. The witches could get rid of the termites in their house, or they could stay with one of their family members. That'd be better. I bet the 70s Hilda would get rid of all the termites in the house, or teleport them to an island. And I bet this will just be for one story, which is good. It makes me thankful that it's an episodic comic for once, because it'd be a pretty boring story if they didn't use magic the whole time. I knew they were just getting all the magic out of the way in the first page. Why would there be a limit? Sabrina shushes while talking to Harvey, and Salem gets the message, but he's still talking anyways. So obviously Harvey would have heard that. Harvey says it's nice of her and her family to let him stay here. The story would be worth it for Sabrina if it ended with her dating him. Hilda says she's so mad she could turn Quigley into a cricket. And I wish she did so he'd get realistic karma. I guess the reason Harvey doesn't hear this is that Sabrina's talking too? It's nice that Harvey cares enough to pet Salem, but it pisses me off that Salem's mad about it, so it can't even be heartwarming. Salem's mad because he just finished a shampoo rinse on his hair, but he could just use magic to undo that problem. Then it turns out that Harvey brought his pet lizard here and wants him to play with Salem. Once he keeps the lizard in a cage like a gerbil, and it tries to lick Salem. It's nice of Harvey to say it'll be fun and hang out here all weekend. So after a while of the comic implying that he's apathetic to Sabrina and self-absorbed, it turns out that he does like her. He asks Stripe how he got back inside his travel case. Of course, Salem warped him there, but you'd think he'd warp him anywhere but there. Hilda and Quigley are leaving to get extra groceries for Harvey. And Quigley pisses me off because he somehow thinks that it'd be evil for Hilda to zap the pantry full. How is that something he's opposed to? He doesn't want the family to save money? He should be written to explain that he thinks people should always be paid for goods, so it'd be wrong of her to zap the pantry full instead of paying the grocery store for groceries. But he's not saying that. Sabrina says Harvey's gonna take a shower, and it turns out Spooky's taking a bubble bath in the upstairs bathtub. I always imagined that Spooky had his own house. He feels so out of place in this one. Since he almost always is right in the cookie jar when he's needed, it'd make more sense if the cookie jar was actually a house of its own that of course he shrinks to fit inside. Why would he feel like staying in there if it wasn't a house with stuff to entertain him? He chases after Harvey for disturbing him, which is also arbitrary. And Harvey gets lied to that Spooky's just an inflatable beach toy sea monster that was put in the tub. Wouldn't he have heard Spooky talking? When he tried to go into the bathtub for a shower, he obviously wouldn't have clothes on. So Spooky would have yelled out and reacted to it. And Harvey would have heard that, obviously. Also, walls are thin in a house. So Harvey would have obviously heard Spooky talking in that whole conversation. Even when I'm in the basement, I can still hear talking up in the living room. There's not anywhere you can go in a house where you won't be able to hear everything at least a little. Why is it too simple for this writer to just write that Harvey's memory of this was erased after he'd inevitably say that Spooky yelled out near him? Spooky pretends to be a deflating beach toy and complains about Zelda stomping him. Won't Harvey hear him say that right behind him? Salem can erase memories just fine. Chloe knows she's a witch and it's fine, but she's responsible enough to not be dumb and make her uncomfortable, taking her for granted. Harvey would try to take advantage of the magic. Also, it'd make for an exciting plot if he just found out Sabrina was a witch and we got to see what would happen. Or at the very least, it'd be interesting if he was actually told the truth about Spooky. At least at that point, we'd finally get to be told what Spooky is, why the hell a genie is living with a bunch of witches that wouldn't need him. Because they could tell Harvey that. They could say, well, let's give him a chance at least. When Quigley gets back home, he's told that Zelda removed all the magic objects from the house while Harvey's been in the shower. Like flying broomsticks, books of spells, and the spooky jar. Yeah, just give the mortal anything he wants. It's not like you can cast any spells on him. Sabrina can go visit him if she misses him. He has his gardening to keep him occupied most of the time. So why should Quigley care if he spends slightly less time with Sabrina than a few minutes each every day? Tilda says that her so-called settlement with Quigley is that they'll all cut back on witchcraft, and he won't pull any more surprises like this one. Why can't they use magic when he's not there to see it? Seriously. Performing magic and then erasing it from Harvey's memory isn't even an option. Doesn't he realize that the universe isn't just for him? Zelda says that she wanted to weave a magic carpet. We see Quigley missing a swing with a baseball bat when Harvey throws a ball at him. Why couldn't the ball have hit his head? Salem says that there's some comfort in the fact that Quiggs will have a sore back all next week. We won't get to see that, will we? Why is there a bird that can talk and only speaks in a dumb reference showing up at Harvey's room repeatedly? What does he have to gain in showing up? He complains that Stripes doesn't want to play with Salem when he's usually so friendly. I mean Stripe. I really wish he was called Stripes instead of Stripe. Then Harvey hears Salem talking behind him and says that it sounded like he came from the kitchen instead of just turning around to see him, like a real person would do. And Hilda says that Quigley used to be a ventriloquist. He doesn't sound exactly like Salem. The sound effect says slap, but I don't really get to see her slap him. That's too bad. Harvey heads home and thanks them, and predictably the house doesn't stay magic free for a second after that because he forced them to not use their magic and they missed it. So Zelda uses magic to pour herself a cup of tea, Hilda zaps up a special blend, and Salem orders a pizza from the other realm instead of Earth for no reason. It's satisfying to see this because they're all doing this to spite him. But I don't know why it took longer than 1 second. I get being creeped out by seeing someone else use magic when you're immortal, but he had no business doing this instead of just getting his own place. He doesn't have to inconvenience them. And it's obviously a case of idiotically bullying the dragon. Hilda even threatened to turn him into a cricket. Why couldn't he have spent the whole time as a cricket? The next story starts out with a panel that seems familiar to me, after I already saw a story that I had. Everyone runs into Salem when he's chasing a mouse, and they're in a hurry. For once it makes sense that Salem didn't use witchcraft when he was told he could've, because that wouldn't be fun. Chasing mice is a game to him. He also brags that his cat skills are good enough to catch any mouse as long as they don't get in his way. We're never gonna see who Zelda was dating, are we? Sabrina says her bed feels more comfy the next morning, and she realizes she's not in her room, and she walks down an overly long staircase. Salem says that it took a lot of magic, but he finally found the perfect house for them. A mansion of 500 rooms. The government would notice if a house showed up out of nowhere and connected to the electric grid and stuff without paying taxes. All he's told is that the house is too big instead of all of this being addressed. Why would witches who can teleport care about how big the house they live in is? And of course it can't be Sabrina's house transformed, or the neighbors would be freaking out and be a part of the plot. Salem says that now he can chase mice without running through an obstacle course. And he snarks that they're just jealous that they didn't think of this great idea. I guess it'll go wrong. Realistically, he gets tired from running after the mouse so much. He's found 20 minutes later and picked up. The story ends with things back to normal, except for the fact that Salem put a traffic light in the house. But I can't even tell which light is on. Okay, aside from a bit of confusion with how the consequences of Salem's plan were ignored, this was a perfect story. There wasn't really much wrong with it. It was actually showing a realistic consequence and not just a made-up one. In the next story, Sabrina tells Chloe that she's ready to start the day as she floats, and I'm glad Chloe appreciates her use of magic for once. Because it's been too long. She says that she makes the sleepover interesting. Sabrina wants them to get to the mall early. I'm guessing they won't, because Sabrina's excited, so it's a hope spot. That's how you know a series is mean to the main character way too often. I immediately predicted the end of the plot. Sabrina says she'll even let Chloe use the new shampoo she bought from home, which smells like a beautiful garden. I'm guessing the shampoo will be magical, since she brought it from her house. Chloe should anticipate this since this is Sabrina we're talking about, and what can't go wrong always does with her. She could have just zapped up shampoo. Quickly asks where something is that he left on the counter, and it turns out to be the new bottle of magic planting growing formula that Zelda and Hilda mixed for him. Since when is he open-minded about magic? It's good, but why does this have to be so rare? This is something he'd never agreed to if he was so opposed to magic earlier. This is the same guy who doesn't want any magic helping out with his greenhouse garden. At least this is a surprise to me. He wants more of the batch that made his plants grow like weeds. Later at the mall, Chloe tells Sabrina that the shampoo made her hair smell great. Sabrina used it too, and it made her hair feel tingly for no logical reason. Why does Jem have to be in the story? Can't there be some other new character that's like her, but we don't get even madder from having a past grudge with her? Why does a flower grow in their heads when there's no soil on it? Yeah, how did that happen? Nobody planted any seeds on their heads. And she can't pull the flower out without being in pain, and it gets replaced immediately. So that's why she doesn't zap it away. But can't she just cast a spell so that it won't get replaced immediately? They attract a lot of attention, fortunately figuring out why it happened, and for some reason, they get some expensive hats to hide their heads, instead of Sabrina just zapping up hats for free. And they walk out of the store with them on, instead of having warped home while hiding in the change room. Jem calls them dorks and asks why they're wearing those hats, but I like Sabrina having a hat. Jem jokes that someone dropped flower pots on their heads, notices that their hats are moving, and the hats are popped off them and a bunch of flowers show up. So Jem screams and her friends run away. You'd think she'd figure out one of them's a witch. That might be a more realistic way she'd treat Sabrina if she knew she was weird. So this plot has no reason to have this kind of padding. And we don't even get to see Zelda's spell stopping the flowers from growing on their heads because fuck priorities. Sabrina explained to the flowers to anybody on the way home that it was just the latest hairstyle. Just a few weirdos somehow made the whole trend happen, when obviously Jem would have done it first if it was the latest trend. I expected Sabrina's shampoo to do something like make any plants around them grow, from the scent alone. Why would it make flowers appear out of nowhere? How did it determine what species of flower to spawn? If it just spawns a random species, that doesn't work because it doesn't match up with how Quigley described it to be. It's meant to make pre-existing flowers grow. This plot would work if an evil witch cursed them and put a lock on the spell. The first story was by Mike Gallagher and infuriated me because the whole family of witches encouraged a mortal like Quigley when he wanted them to stop using magic just because he invited Harvey's family to temporarily stay with them. If they humor him that easily, Why don't they do this all the time? He was just being selfish, ruining their fun. He's the definition of a controlling killjoy. Harvey saw Spooky, but didn't get told the truth, so we never get to learn why Spooky lives here. He also somehow bought the whole ventriloquist lie when Salem talked. The whole story just treats you like an idiot because it expects you to believe that Harvey would be that gullible. The last two stories are by Angelo. The second one was fine. Salem warps his host family to a mansion so he won't run into them chasing mice, just to find out that chasing a mouse for too long gets exhausting. The final story is much more baffling. Quigley had a refreshing out of character moment by asking for a batch of flower growth potion for his flowers, even though he hates magic with an irrational passion, to the point of even refusing magic that would help him. And no one points this out, and he doesn't say that he's getting over it. Most importantly, why did a flower growth shampoo make flowers appear on Sabrina's head out of thin air? There was no soil or seeds there. And obviously Sabrina would have warped home right away after that, if not pointed to get rid of the problem. It was nice seeing her with a hat though, and seeing Jem get freaked out. But we should have seen Zelda talk to them and fix their problem instead of seeing Jem again.